cannot go, okay, awareness has this particular corresponding object, and when that corresponding object disappears, it also disappears, which is the case with consciousness. Consciousness has to have the appropriate sensory media, the appropriate name and form for it to manifest itself, right? So without vision, how do you know you have eye consciousness? How do you know you have sight? Without form, how do you know you have sight? You cannot, right?
Right.
Without sound, how can you know that you have hearing consciousness? You cannot. And so consciousness is different from awareness in that its manifestation is only possible by supporting conditions. Yeah. Here may be a useful analogy, something that potentially may be useful. You have a body of water that is intrinsically amorphous, that's intrinsically shapeless. But when you put water into a circular shape container, it becomes circular in shape. You put it in a different container, it becomes that shape. And phenomenologically, what is consciousness? In one sense, there are certain interrelated thoughts that are kind of like speaking to each other as if they belong to the self-same person. That's a stream of consciousness. But other than that, there's no proof that there is any boundary to that consciousness. The consciousness only derives its boundary by self-referencing thoughts. Okay, so for example, one thought would arise and go, oh, I'm Alice. What am I going to do tomorrow? Right. And then another thought may arise tomorrow because, I'm Alice. Yeah, yesterday I was thinking that I was going to do this thing today. Because there are a lot of these mutually referencing thoughts as if they're all speaking about the one same subject. And that requires clinging, that requires identification. So in the Buddhist exegetical traditions, you don't see a lot of this in the early suttas themselves, but in the early exegetical traditions, consciousness is held together through clinging. It's held together. It doesn't have any inherent boundary, but it's because all these thoughts kept referencing to similar objects. And so consciousness seems to have been given shape. Consciousness only looks like a, self-cohering entity to the extent that there are these patterns, there are these memories that are repetitive, that keep rising up. Yes, they're dissimilar, but they're somewhat related. Same tendencies are held together through rehearsal. Similar reactions, similar mental defilements kept arising through rehearsal because they get repeated. It's in that repetitiveness, it's in that self-cohering pattern that we say, here is a consciousness. Now, awareness is not held together by any activities. In some sense, you could say that consciousness borrows its light from awareness. But then it's a conditioned phenomenon. Now, if you conflate the two and you go, okay, awareness must mean that I'm aware of something. When I go to sleep, was I aware or not? Awareness must mean that, when I was put under during surgery, when I had a full body anesthesia, I must continue to exist somehow by knowing something. There has to be some content, there has to be some corresponding object to this knowing. Right? When you do that, you are actually identifying with consciousness. You've lost sight of awareness, what awareness is about. consciousness requires a corresponding object to prove its existence. So when you fall asleep, you go, my consciousness disappears. I was unconscious. I can't remember a thing. What happened to me at night? Nothing. Right? What happened to me when I was under anesthesia? Nothing. It's like as if there was no passage of time, subjectively speaking. So when you go, okay, I need to prove that awareness is there even when I go to sleep, even when I go under anesthesia, what you're doing is you're trying to hold on to something. You're trying to identify something. You're trying to localize something. That's me. That I need to prove to myself that awareness is always there, so that I feel safe. So I know that I'm immortal, that I'm, beyond death.
Yeah.
But all the things that you're grasping onto, they don't prove the existence or disprove the existence of awareness, which is unconditioned, which is outside of conditions. It's not may manifest as a result of your being awake. It's not made to disappear as a result of your falling asleep. You see?
Oh, yeah.
We are deeply attached to the activity of knowing. Knowing feels like it's at the center of our being, right? So there are layers of sankharas, and what lies at the center is this knowing. And potentially can form subtle attachment to that knowing. But okay, knowing is awareness. Awareness is nibbana, is the deathless. It's the self. But in stating that, it can potentially be very misleading. You are actually not arriving at awareness. You are identifying with the knowing activity. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
As long as you identify, as soon as you go, my awareness is this thing, it's this activity. What are you doing? You are dealing with an object of awareness. You're no longer dealing with awareness. Awareness, by definition, is attributeless. It's not a content. Even the fact that you know, there's knowing going on.
Oh.
That itself is an object. Otherwise, how do you know you're knowing? How do you know that you're not knowing when you sleep?
Right.
You see? And so, if this issue is not resolved, then a lot of meditators that get scared, they go, the fact that when I go to sleep and I become unconscious goes to show that awareness can die.
Right.
But the Buddha talked about the deathless, the non-manifested consciousness. Non-manifested meaning that its manifestation does not require a corresponding condition. You can only prove that you can hear when there's sound. When there's no sound, no way for you to know whether you can hear or not. Yeah. So in such a case, why is it meaningful to speak of awareness if it's a non-thing, if it's a non-object, it's a non-entity? Why is it meaningful to speak of? Because in our spiritual journey, we need to start somewhere, and the way to start anything is to have an intentional object at hand. You need to have a focus, you need to have a goal, you have to have a purpose. This is the distance I'm traversing. That's the place I'm trying to get to. You need to start there, right? And then as you pacify sankharas, then you begin to see, even this idea of there being a there, something beyond me, like a destination I will eventually arrive at. Even this is a sankhara. Even this is just an idea. Even this is just a content awareness. Even that is not awareness itself. As your mind quiets down, as you resolve sankharas, and this becomes clearer and clearer to you. This is very hard to explain. This is very, but you will arrive at a kind of peace that is the most compelling reality compared to all phenomena you've ever experienced. all phenomena that you've ever experienced in comparison to this are shown to are illusory, they are illusion-like, right? Because they only borrow their reality from this, whereas awareness doesn't borrow reality from anything else. For lack of better term, I'm going to start sounding like a non-Buddhist, right? So one way to uh, look at awareness is to say, who's my true self? Who's my true self? You could go through a sort of investigative self-inquiry, right? And by shedding off layers and layers, that which can be demonstrated to be not self. And then your mind, it's like gradually becoming at peace, and it feels as if it no longer have to go out of itself to assert its own being. It is self-evident. There's no need for it to have to define, to give rise to thought and go, who am I? Oh, I am this. I'm here. I'm doing it. It no longer need to do that. And that's Nibbana, really. So Nibbana equals awareness, really. Equals non-manifested consciousness. A way to think of awareness is it's the existential basis itself, and need not be knowing it. Knowing is very close. Okay, you have to start somewhere. So you could start by saying, well, it's very obvious that I am not all these phenomena, but I am awareness. You could start there. You go, I am awareness. I am knowing. I am the knower. And then using that as your starting point, you will eventually see that even that intention, I am this, that intention is not you. What is you is just, you have to be quiet. You have to, there's no activation of the mind anymore. Yeah.
So when I'm quiet, so there's no thought, right? So it's very peace.
No thought is just one kind of resolution of sankharas. It's entirely possible for a person to have no thought, but still have clinging. Right? It's possible to cling to a thoughtless state. It's possible to cling to second jhana and above. Right?
Oh, okay.
So, but you could start with no thought.
Right. No thought,
Right.
and so it's very peace, no
Right.
attachment, nothing. I
Right.
think nothingness is the most accurate word for awareness. Nothingness. Yeah.
No words is ultimately appropriate. You can always find fault with designator. Yeah. Words they just evoke perceptions, they evoke associations, they evoke memories. And in the treatment of concepts, the treatment of perception is such that your mind has to locate, has to land somewhere, it has to assert, it has to define. Those are all sankharas. When you're quiet enough, you'll see this. This sounds like an abstruse philosophy, but to a quiet mind, this is so clear, right? You're none of that. You cannot be defined. You're not anything that attention can land on.
But I still don't understand how do you explain the awareness when you deep sleep? The awareness exists.
So here's a kind of a non-answer to that question. Is like for someone who abides in awareness, he feels unthreatened, even if somehow it's proven that there's no knowing in sleep. Right? That's one way of responding to that question. There's another way. There are many different ways to respond to that question. Another way is to understand that there's a kind of knowing where there's no processing of information and no storage of information. And so you could know, but you wouldn't remember that you've known. Does that make sense? So it's very hard to prove this, right? But
Sorry.
there's a way of knowing in your sleep. There's knowing. It's just that you don't remember it. And a knowing is a knowing of a content that doesn't typically associate with the storylines that we use during wakeful hours. In wakeful hours, we're continuously reminding who we are because like the related thoughts that maintain this frame of your personality, they keep arising. They keep reminding who you are. If you look at your so-called memories, they're not objective storage of everything that's happened to you in the past. No, there are selective memories. Things are particularly meaningful to you, and you keep going through them. You repetitively go through the more or less the same set of memories. It's those same memories that more or less cohere together the seeming boundary of your consciousness. Yeah. So awareness doesn't die in sleep. That should be answer enough. Awareness lies outside time and space. That should be answer enough. It's
Yeah.
not shut down due to the rising or disappearance of a condition. When sleep sets in and it shuts down. It doesn't. No, it's not like that. It only appears so if you conflate awareness with knowing, with the processing of content, information. There's another kind of awareness. It's very hard to describe. This is freedom. This is freedom. It is the uncontained, non-definable peace. That's really permeating all phenomena. Yeah.
So when I'm awake, right? So when I practice like 16 steps, Satipatthana,
Yeah.
so I'm aware something, right? I'm aware my body, right?
Yeah.
I can aware the body is moving or something, or the mind comes, thoughts comes and goes. So I know the thoughts is not me, right? I know that I am the aware. At that time, when I'm awake, when I observe, right? So the mind and the body, I'm awareness, right? It's easier for me, and I know the awareness is unconditioned. So it will still remain there.
Typically, the sort of mental functions we use in a satipatthana practice is called appropriate attention. It's a sankhara, right?
Right.
But then you can modify, you can adjust the attention in such a way so that it's in greater alignment with natural awareness. You could do so by calming mental sankharas, right? Less artifice on your part, less contraction, less, like closing in with your attention. Um, um, so as long as you're dealing with a topic, as is the case in Satipatthana, like, oh, I'm focusing on craving, I'm focusing on movement of the mind, I am focusing on worrying, right, as a phenomenon, and so on and so forth, then you are zooming in and out. You are trying to concentrate on something and exclude other things. You're allocating your mental resources, right? Give priority to one phenomenon at the cost of other phenomena, typically. Right? So in Satipatthana, we are just trying to be more natural, to be closer, to better borrow the light of awareness so that the Satipatthana practice is less strained, more sustainable, it's more conducive to bliss, to peace. Yeah. I don't know if I answered your question. If I haven't understood your question correctly, let me know.
Okay. My question is like from the Satipatthana, I can know I'm awareness because I'm aware the body, the mind, yeah, and I'm not identified with the mind. I am identified awareness.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
yeah,
Right. Initially, you need an object, right, to identify with. Right. It's very, very hard for people to, in one single step, right? Circumvent all the gradual steps of training, and then arrive at unfabricated awareness. It's exceedingly rare, right? So it requires gradual
Yeah.
pacification, right?
Yeah.
And this usually will involve, okay, first you need to learn to direct your attention to an appropriate place. And what are some appropriate places? Candidates for appropriate places, like the liberation gates. And what are the liberation gates? The liberation gates are supposedly ever-present features of your experience that you can focus on. For example, one of the ever-present features of your experience is called signlessness, anamikta. Right? So what is signlessness? Behind all the manifestations, all the experiences you have, there is a background that is without feature. And when you're thinking about this, when you're trying to lie back and not become lost in the signs, in the perceptual field, right? There is still a sankhara, but it's a better sankhara. It's a subtler sankhara. You're experiencing greater peace. It becomes a basis of your concentration. You can focus on. So how exactly do you do so? Here's just one possible way. There are many different ways to arrive at signlessness. Right? Whatever arises in your experience, don't give attention to that. Our tendency is whatever newly arises, your attention is going to close in because you're constantly looking for new experiences in our attentional field. We want novel things. So something pops in, new feeling, a person walking by, a new smell, a sound, and you close in. And then there's a fixity of the attention. There is a delight. There is a helicoptering around this newly arisen phenomenon. And you could train yourself to see that as a sankhara. This is a mental exertion. You dissolve that, you rest, you fall back to where you are,
Yeah.
okay, so to speak. Right?
Yeah.
Instead of doing this, always doing this, signless. I'm not interested in the content. I'm interested in the non-changing peaceful background, signless background. Right? Now, even that is still a content. Even that, in the Buddhist terminology, is a formless perception. That's a formless perception. That's still a content of awareness. But it's a superior content. It's a content of awareness that will help further pacify your sankhara so you can get ever closer to awareness. Yeah. And there are many other liberation gates you could use, right? Wishlessness. That's an eternal feature of your experience. Emptiness, for example, right? Non-directedness, right? Boundlessness, right? And we could go on. Imperturbability.
Yeah. That's a formless perception, right? There's a form. They are all formless.
Right, they're closely linked to the formless attainments. In fact, many of them have the same names. Not a thingness is supposed to be a formless state, but it's also one of the liberation gates. One of the liberation, supposedly an arahat's mind has a feature of not a thingness. And not a thingness is a feature that is detectable in all of our experiences.
Yeah, I understand what
Okay, good.
Wait, thank you so much, Dr. Chu.
Okay.
So I got so my views were challenged earlier, and I'd like to hear more about the unconditioned versus awareness, because I always thought that the unconditioned was the unconditioned, and then one would be aware of it. And I know there's this huge like argument about it with like Venerable Tanisro and some of the other monks, where they're defining like an unconditioned consciousness, and I just
Right.
don't know about that.
Yeah, there are numerous sutta passages on this, right? So, uh, for example, there's a sutta passage that goes something like, if there is not this dimension of unboundedness, deathless, then there's no escape from death. right? And so on and so forth. There are quite a lot of, and really subjectively, when we're talking about such a subject, it's very, very hard to describe. It's just kind of a doom project. It's going to just generate controversies for people who are still, attached to views, who are not yet at the level of transcending over views and completely resolving this in awareness, right? The mind naturally wants what is truth, and I'm invested in truth. I am this being who is getting ever closer to truth, and there's emotional investment in a certain position. But as we meditate more, as we debate less, you see that those are just really just ideas, and ideas can potentially be helpful if you take them as pointers. It become non-contentious. One of the signs of a good meditator is you there's no point in duking out who has the correct idea, because ultimately this is beyond description. You clearly see that. You're constantly at a loss for words to describe whatever, freedom, peace, and some deeper meditative experiences are really just so mind-blowing. They really overturn these ideas that you hold, concepts that you hold, even basic structure of the universe. So there's time, there's space, and you go into states where all these long-held assumptions are just completely overturned, right? That the assumption that there's inside, there's outside, things are one, are many, and so forth. And you arrive at a point where you go, you stop wanting to define it. And by the way, for the Buddha, a view or our need to define something is not innocuous. It's closely related to attachment. Investment in view is in direct correlation to one's attachment. So a stream enter is said to be free from views, right? For very good reasons. Yeah. And this is why, like when I was a person may go, all right, Buddhists talk about no self, Hindus talk about true self, who's right, who's wrong? Right? And for you, you're just interested in, well, how does this particular teaching guide my present intention here? What's the usefulness of it? There's a use for the not self teaching. There's a use for the true self teaching, really, in the end. Both can potentially work. And a real meditator has no ontological commitment. He's just interested, what can I do about this present intention? Where do I lead it? And knowing how to lead, to lead your intention so that it transcends itself, that's called appropriate attention. You stop, feel riled up by political ideologies, by philosophical ideologies, by whatever. Just those are just thoughts. It's just, and you go straight to the heart of the matter. What is important?
Yeah, I guess I'm having a hard time having a clear vision. I mean, I've been practicing pretty hard lately, and I've had some things I might consider successful, but not the deathless. I fall short of the deathless, and I want to see it.
That deathless will only become manifest when intention ceases. And when you go, I'm going to try very hard, I'm going to try to get there and know something, in many ways it's kind of like defeating the samadhi, right? In many ways it's kind of like undermining the samadhi. If instead you're just focusing on what is the mental movement right now, just focusing on this. Feel its stress, feel its pressure, feel its movement, right? And then you're endowed with the right view, so you're in general moving in the direction of renouncing sankharas, renouncing intentionality. Okay? You're not afraid to renounce it, by the way. For a lot of people, their clinging is still so strong that the very idea of renouncing intention brings to mind the idea of losing control, losing agent, losing self, losing comfort, losing security, so on and so forth. But when you're ready and you see that, no, you don't ever lose your self. You can only lose that which is not self. Self, by definition, is something you cannot lose. Otherwise, who's losing that? Right? So be patient about the process. Okay, don't. When people are saying things, don't be envious. Don't go, oh, I want to figure that one out, or don't get, um, heated. Like, oh, I want to debate with that person. I want to prove to him, her, she's wrong. Don't do that. Just be patient. Keep practicing. Stay with what is important, and the mind will quiet down. And when the mind quiets down, you feel like all the beliefs that you held in the past are overturned. And there's real freedom. And even, like in my own experience, the episodes where craving gets really diminished, right, are accompanied by times when the mind is really free of concepts and ideas. Let me give you an example, right? So we take it for granted that, we are operating in space-time. There's distance between me and other things, right? I am here, and then there are things, some things are near to me, some things are farther away from me. Right? And, there are states of samadhi where you clearly see that the very perception of holding a distance, of thinking that there's an object far from me, and I need to send out my attention to that object in order to know its existence. It requires more straining of the mind. You could detect that. And you drop that, you collapse that. And everything becomes, for lack of better terms, immediacy. There's no distance. And in that state, you see that that's a very ideal place for you to eradicate craving. Craving is only possible when there is distance. Craving is the desire to bridge the space. Why do we crave? It's because there's something that's outside me. It can fill me up and somehow make me bigger, happier. And you see that's a mental strain. There's sankhara therein. Okay, and so this is a reason that the Buddha, he warns people about losing themselves in mystical states, but he also talks about using the mystical states skillfully to the end of dispassion.
And how is that?
We relentlessly classify sankharas. Then our identity first shifts, eventually to no identity. Right? So first you shift your identity. Initially, we are this person who takes pride of ideas, the information we accumulated, the suttas that we read, the answers that we've distilled, that we've accumulated. Right? We hold a certain identity, and to preserve this identity, we will want to argue, debate. We're interested in controversies, that sort of thing. Right? As your identity shifts, and you're less and less of your sense of security and pride and happiness are derived from that kind of identity, and more from, things of Jhanic qualities, contentment, gratitude, freedom from ill will, right, and abiding in rarefied perceptions, right, and so forth. And you're much better gratified by this kind of identity than the former identity. And you will naturally what? You'll naturally be not interested in, these usual pursuits of the worldlings, debate, figuring out Tanisaur is right or he's wrong, which one of the Buddhists are Buddhists right or Hindus wrong or the other way around. And you just see, this is dukkha. There's a way to resolve it. You just keep focusing on this. Look at any sort of pride as really silly and ugly and foolish, right? It's just any sort of like lower identities, like if we think we're wealthy and we take pride in that, right? Or we think we're talented, we're funny, we're well read, we're whatever. Look at all of this identity. It's just disgusting, foolish, hollow, you name it. And when you're able to see that, then your mind inclines towards that, which is less conditional, which involves less harm, which involves less straining. Let the mind quiet down. There's no secret. Right? Putting aside all the profound, teachings, these very abstruse sounding teachings, and in the end, it boils down to just quieting down the mind. We learn the proper skills to quiet the mind. The process is very enjoyable. Right? Feel strain with the force, free from hindrances like doubts, uncertainties. Right? There's just greater clarity, there's greater fulfillment, greater contentment. And it's almost magical the way the mind will kind of like reorient itself, sorting things out on its own without you having to think very hard about and analyze things. As long as you loosen up your grip and like your clinging and you quiet down. It's like the five aggregates has a way of sorting things out.
Dr. Chu,
Okay, now it's
yeah, how about I say the awareness and the being? So sometimes I
that's one
feel,
way. That's one way. There are many ways to help you become better established in awareness. And one way is to inquire about being. What's it like to be a being? If people ask Alice, do you exist? Hey, what a silly question. Of course I exist. How do you know? What is the experience of being? And by the way, I'm not asking you to answer that. I'm not looking for a content answer, right? I'm framing the way the inquiry can be done. Yeah. There are many different ways. One of the favorite inquiries I do since I was really, at kindergarten age. What is the self? this is such a strange thing that there's this thing called the self. What the heck? There's something that can know itself and go, this is myself. What the heck? And this is such an engrossing question for me. It's just like I would just sink into it for extended periods of time. What is the self? Right? And this kind of inquiry, okay, yes, on the one hand, potentially accords you the benefits of serving as a koan, that there is that, but there's something else. It can also potentially become a satipatthana-like practice. How so? When you're inquiring the nature of self, and you go, what would make a self a self? Right? What are the characteristics of being a self? It has to be close, it has to be intimate, it has to have no distance from you. And even with saying this is a little silly. Your self is close to you. Like there are two separate selves, right? But when you're doing this, potentially you're guiding your intention to rest in its source. And you're learning to not to scatter your energy to perceptions, to objects, to sankharas. You're learning to, so by inquiring, what makes a self a self? What is truly intimate? What is that which has no distance to me? What is that that's all pervading, all enveloping? Right? That makes an experience an experience. That makes an experience, to have this quality called knowing. What is that? Right? And when you're doing this, you do it the right way, and your mind quiets down. There are many different ways. Yeah. To help convince, these individual thoughts, these individual intentions, like these individual thoughts, intentions, when they arise from their perspective, you go, I am this person. I am here. It feels localized. It feels like this is a separate being. You're dealing with the issue. There are objects that you need to manipulate, or someplace you need to go. But that's from the perspective of this intention. And if you're able to bring this to rest, and you're no longer identifying with the intention, you're no longer looking through the lens of intention, or rather you're at rest through awareness. And what happens? Then things become clear, and there's no attachment. You see that attachment that can have no foothold.
So,
And the traditional satipatthana can bring a person there too. You don't, if you don't like the I am awareness type of teaching, that's okay. Learn to pacify bodily sankharas. Learn to pacify mental sankharas. Learn to let go of, phenomena that your mind is identifying with. It will take you to the same place.
so in my situation, I think sometimes I use the awareness, sometimes I use the
That's fine.
six
That's fine.
feet.
So long that the switching of the techniques does not lead to restlessness, disorientation, directionlessness, aimlessness, and so forth, discursiveness, right? If you can manage, sure. Oftentimes, there are kinds of practitioners who, by dabbling in multiple techniques, she allows those multiple techniques to supplement, to elucidate each other, to illuminate each other, right? This technique makes it clearer to you how you could better practice the other technique. And this one is doing the same for the other one too. That's totally possible.
Okay.
But then there are also, I would say that most people, this would just completely confuse them, throw them off balance. So it's not, once again, this is not a universal recommendation, right? You have to assess how you're doing. What could bring about clarity, ease, relaxation? That's a foundation for wisdom.
Yeah. Okay. I see. Thank you so much.
Hey, Dr. Chu.
Is that Jared?
Yes, Jared. Yeah.
Hey, hello, Jared.
Hey. Um, so before I was hospitalized, my practice was doing pretty well. And then after coming back and recovering, I've just kind of gotten really into like sense pleasures. And I'm having a hard time with like sensory restraint.
Okay. Yeah, you want to make sure that you're you're properly relaxing yourself, that you are protecting a sense of ease in the body. If you don't have that, your mind will be hungry and will look for junk food. Right? So make sure that you have an efficient way of managing your stress, ideally moment after moment. It's a high frequency practice where you're just in contact with, say, for example, easeful sensations in the body. You're enjoying being at peace. It's like that. Yeah. If you don't have this um, alternative, right, and there's no controlling of the mind, it will just go for whatever it instinctively feel like can bring happiness. Yeah. So take care of your person, right? Making sure that yeah, but you don't necessarily have to do formal sittings in your current condition. And we talked about this, right? But remember this key: high frequency, short period. Do the practice as often as you can manage to remember. But then be content if you are only able to practice for 3 seconds or 5 seconds. Right, so in your situation, this is a good way of approach. Don't force yourself to sit long, to force yourself in a artificial state for prolonged period. Make it natural, right? And remember to continue to play pickleball, to have some kind of workout routine, and walk in nature. Find things that help where doing so you could palpably feel like the easing of the bodily tension, like gentle yoga, tai chi, that sort of thing. These are not the only ways. Just taking a walk in the garden casually, leisurely, right? With all your worries aside. Don't concentrate on any lofty meditation object. Just keep your goal very modest. Like, let me enjoy leisure a little more. Let me see if I could enjoy leisure a little more. The fact that I don't have anything to do right now. Nice. Savor it. And see, how that affects bodily sensations, staying at ease. And if you cannot afford to do so many things, that's okay. Let's go back to the grossest, the easiest, most elementary. Nice to have nothing to do. I'm enjoying. The mind is free from worry. The mind is free from dizziness at this moment. And learn to frequently seek nourishment in a body that is at ease. So think of yourself as like someone with a straw, right? Somehow you need to stick the straw somewhere into some beverage, right? And to extract the liquid therein. Yeah, and so remember, I'm here to care for this person, this Jared. He is worthy. He deserves deliverance. He deserves my caring, my loving care. Okay, you hold this attitude in the mind, and then you make sure, is he properly fed? Jared, how are you doing? I'm a little bored. Okay, here. Try this. I'm a little restless here. I'm a little hungry here. Here, try this. Try to make contact. Try to be in tune with this easeful sensation. Have this attitude of you're healing yourself, caring for yourself, looking after yourself, making sure that you're connected to these proper nourishments. And by the way, sensual pleasures are not all bad, categorically bad. Their sensual pleasures are addictive and potentially dangerous, right? And then there are essential pleasures that are really, if you approach them the right way, they're rather innocuous. Like for example, enjoying delicious food is much less addictive than, say, enjoying passionate affairs. It's rather easy to enjoy delicious food all the while maintaining that ease in the body. It's very, very hard, if not downright impossible, to preserve ease in the body and then enjoy a passionate affair. So use that as kind of like your litmus test, right? To see whether or not it's a sensual pleasure okay to partake in. If by listening to this beautiful music, bodily ease is not interrupted, it's not undermined, then it's okay. And in fact, see how what your experience is when there's ease and then there is this pleasant sensory experience. Chances are you'll see how that ease in the body is kind of like armor you're wearing. It's like a protection that you put on yourself so that you're not vulnerable to the corrupting effect of sensual pleasures. And there's a sense of accomplishment, there's a sense of joy. Oh, wow, I've rendered a poison into something non-poisonous. Because I'm protected by peace. I'm protected by a sense of ease. You know, there are meditators who go, oh, sensual pleasures are bad. So, oh, there's a beautiful sunset. Oh, no, I cannot see that. That's attachment, right? If you take that approach, chances are you might develop pathological aversion, you might develop suppression. You know, it's just the better way to move forward is to integrate the enjoy of food, as long as the enjoy of food doesn't undermine your practice. Your meditation will naturally take you to less dependency on the essential food. Naturally take it. You don't have to force it. You don't have to be in a hurry. You just have to stay alert. Stay keenly interested in this process. I'm feeding myself well, healing myself well, making sure it's eating the right food, it's being nourished. This is called feeling-based satipatthana. Yeah.
And I had tried doing like a balanced consciousness practice, like these things I'm interested in are manifesting consciousness, but that didn't really have much of an effect on my desire for them.
Are you talking about self-inquiry into the nature of consciousness as a practice method? Is that what you're
Um,
saying?
I'm not quite sure it was like that, but it was just kind of like realizing, okay, like I'm experiencing consciousness, right? It's not really like a cake. It's like it's like in consciousness is the cake.
Right. Okay. I see what you mean. Right. We talked about this, right? Okay. Usually, if you know what you're doing, it doesn't take long, or you start feeling like experiences are phenomenological. They're not distant from me. Your mind more easily quiets down. You will notice these benefits, right? And if you don't notice these benefits, you're free to switch to a different meditation object, right? Or you could be a little patient and give it a little more try. The reason I am saying that in your case, it might worth a longer trial period is because you mentioned you're interested in this. That interest will provide you energy, the vidya. And that's very, very good. If there's a topic that just piques your interest, right? You're just naturally curious about this. You find the topic engrossing. That's really good. Capitalize on that.
And something else that,
Look. Sorry, Jared.
no, no, please go ahead.
Okay, all right. So if you like more feedback, then you will want to tell me more details of how you go about doing this practice. When you say that you're trying to look at how all phenomena are just of the same nature as consciousness, are just manifestation of consciousness, how exactly do you go about it? And if there are noticeable hindrances, difficulties, and
Yeah, I kind of did like a few different things that might be considered related. So one thing that I was doing was just noticing that there is awareness,
right,
and then noticing that there are things manifesting in awareness,
right,
and then
right.
noticing that it's not really that they manifest in awareness, it's that these things inherently like have awareness as part of them.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then it was like, okay, so maybe there's this beautiful person that I have some interest over. It's like, well, they're really just like sight, sounds,
Yeah.
smells, tastes, touches, and thoughts, but that didn't really have much
Okay,
of
I
an
see. All
effect.
right. Okay. There are instances where the formless states can be practiced without any basis in the form jhanas. And then there are instances where the formless states should be practiced on the basis of form jhana. Okay. So if your mind is still behaving like it's easily lusting after essential food, beautiful human beings, you're easily succumb to temptation, then it's best to have greater jhanic foundations. And this will mean that, delighting in dispassion, delighting in ease, delighting in relaxation, right? Developing confidence about it, feeling inspired by such an approach, and so forth. That's, have this jhana basis. In which case, your mind and body will be well fed. It will not, they will not easily succumb to sensual temptations. Then you could afford to do the more rarefied, the more ethereal, such as boundless consciousness. Everything just boundless consciousness. And by the way, you don't have to rigidly compartmentalize these two. Oh, first I need to master jhana, right? I have to reach this level. Then I could start experimenting with balanced consciousness. You could just go, like frequently remind yourself to anchor in a jhanic basis, and then to occasionally have forays into this. Is all that I've ever experienced is the texture of consciousness. I've never stepped out of this. That's the initial inquiry. I've never stepped out of this. Everything I've ever experienced are never objects. They're always the very nature of consciousness. And you're fascinated by this. And so long that you're fascinated by this, then you would have an easier time for your mind to concentrate, to develop samadhi around that object.
And I was wondering about my mother. I mean, she's healthy, but she's still like getting up there in years, and I feel very attached to her, and there's a lot of love, and I just feel like like she's going to die at some point, or she's going to get very
Right,
ill at some point. And
right.
how do I get ready for that?
Yeah. So there are, like the really great techniques, and then there are the, just generally good techniques, right? So the generally good technique, these are not necessarily the best techniques, right? Involves you're making sure that your present dealings with her will not lead to future remorse. You didn't, like you treat her with sincerity, right? You cherish the opportunity of your interaction with her, using this opportunity to edify, to elevate both you and your mother. This doesn't mean that you're preaching to your mother, lecturing to your mother all the time, right? This means that you bring your presence to your interaction with her. You bring peace. You bring loving concern. Right? You bring acceptance. Patience. You let these qualities be kind of like a cloth you wear. So everywhere you go, there's this ambiance about you, and then you allow people to bask in your ambiance, and people can receive healing powers from that. Really, really. We could be in the presence of someone and find it very soothing, very, very healing. Yeah, and even though you may or may not include verbal instructions, right? And like verbal guiding, like dharmic guiding to your mother, you are still planting planting karmic seeds in her. It's let me put it this way. Let's say that you have two equally wretched children, right? And one is wretched, but she was exposed to a person who is just evincing peace, evincing some quality that's closer to the unconditioned. And the other kid has no such benefit, and they grew up, right? The chances of the second person to commit suicide, to give up on herself, is much greater. You're having made contact with something close to the unconditioned, and to bask in someone's dharmic presence, it's really an awesome merit. It's a great blessing. I know this sounds mystical and all that, but really, there's a karmic seed. It will help immunize you from future disasters. When future disasters do hit, when you're like greatly unsettled, you don't go crazy. You don't become confused and resort to actions that would just aggravate the situation. It's like naturally you will feel like there's a beam of hope in you. Instinctively that there's hope. There's a way out of this. You may not necessarily associate this beam of hope with your encounter with this person, but it has something to do with your encounter of that person. It's because your prior exposure to such a being that you know there is hope. And then there is even superior techniques than what I just described in dealing with your mother, right? To transcend over personality view altogether, right? For as long as we entertain the idea that I'm over here, I am this being, with this personality, she's that being over there, then we never escape from the fear. We never escape from that regret. Oh, I could have done better with my mother, and she also holds similar regrets. Something I could. In every loving mother's mind, in every loving son's mind, you can never achieve perfection. There's always something you could do better, and that becomes a regret in you. And what great suffering. Yeah, but if you realize that really there are no persons, they're just awareness. This awareness is not mine, it's not hers. It's not, oh, there's this awareness in her and she can become enlightened to it. And there's awareness over here. No, even that are ideas. Even those are sankharas. There is just awareness. And in awareness, there is no separation. In the mother that you see, those are fleeting impressions, fleeting signs. person that you really careful, the mother, the very essence of a mother, you really careful, you see that it's completely non-distinguishable from yourself. No sense of separation. In some, I know this sounds, a little new agey and all that, but we are one. You are me, I am you. Thought says otherwise. Intention says otherwise. But really, that's the truth. And in such a case, you don't worry for your mother. These phenomena will pass, there are behavioral patterns that arise and pass that get perpetuated, but no essence is really hurt in the process. She's not all that, so don't worry. She's not the suffering individual, the wretched being, the phenomena, series of phenomena you interpret to be this wretched being who's suffering at her core. No, at her core, she's not suffering. And just rest in that. Even if we don't necessarily comprehend this completely, rest in that faith. It's okay. I'm not afraid of separation because we will not be separated. We're one. Rest in that. This is kind of a perception you can potentially rest in. And the reason that we are clinging to someone is because we're in a habit of extracting some gratification from the person, like sense of security from the person. This person is always there to care for me, to offer me consolation. Right? The more you learn to tap into what is closer to you, the less you will naturally be reliant on external sources. Work on becoming attuned to inner ease. Develop robust concentration around it so that your lifestyle is just revolving around the sense of ease. It permeates everything you do. Your thoughts arise in this atmosphere of ease. You move, you do things while being surrounded, protected, enveloped by the sense of ease. And when you do that, you're properly nourishing yourself, and you find you're less dependent, you're less needy, you're less clinging, and you can love with greater purity. So by practicing this, it doesn't mean that I'm trying to sever your connection with your mother. It doesn't mean that. Right? You could love in a way that truly benefits. You can love in a way that's truly gratifying. Doesn't involve fear. Don't be afraid to occasionally confound your mother with mystical mumble jumbles by telling her, "Mom, you and me, we're one. Don't be afraid that one day we'll be parted. Don't be afraid, Mom." Tell her sincerely, something like that. Otherwise, there's a good chance that we would regret later on. After she passes, I had the opportunity to really connect with her. And your mother is going to look all dumbfounded, but then she's going to be happy. She's going to be healed in the process, receive healing in the process. A lot of fears will be allayed. A lot of good karmic seeds are planted as a result. Mom, don't be afraid. That's a way more artful way of saying I love you. It's like saying I love you. It's done in a way more artful way. She'll feel loved.
Yeah, I have a difficult relationship with my mother, and it's like probably the biggest obstacle in my life. And my mom and I live together, and we argue quite a lot. I mean, there's closeness and there's love,
Mm.
but
Yeah.
there's also so much discontent,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
distracting.
Yeah. Okay, so there are instances of genuine disorders, like personality disorders and so forth. So that's a completely different story, right? So if you're living with someone who's just clinically disordered, right, and then it's really no way you could have you could realistically hope that, through effort, through sincerity, earnestness, we're going to improve on the relationship. So I'm not suggesting that your mother is like that. I'm just trying to get this stipulation out of the way. Then the other thing is, some measure of physical seclusion is very good for the development of mental seclusion. Um, if a source of difficulty is living in proximity with you, like all the time, most of the time, and it's just continuously irking you somehow, and it's too much of a hurdle to jump through, especially for relatively inexperienced meditator. And I'm not suggesting you're inexperienced or experienced. I'm just putting this out there. So this doesn't mean that you necessarily have to move out, right? This doesn't necessarily mean that you want to move to a different state or a different city, or like not live with her under the same roof. But this would mean that you're deliberately creating some seclusion time. Like don't be under the roof all the time. Like find time for your solitude. Learn to enjoy solitude. And in solitude, we will have built up enough paramis and good energies that when we are dealing with familiar people, we don't just automatically resort to old habitual patterns. That we're dealing with them having come from a equanimous place, having come from a non-reactive place. So this is the bottom. How much physical seclusion is needed? It's the same thing as how much sensory restraint is needed. You're performing your diagnosis, right? Is it okay if my eyes look around? Or is that too much indulgence? Or would it be okay for me to look around, but just not look with lustful looks? Or is it that I need to gaze down frequently and not look around? Like, what is the best way to practice sensory restraint for you? Well, really, there's no one fixed formula for every single person. You look at how you are able to steady your ease, your inner peace, your frame of relaxation, whatever sort of satipatthana you're working on. If by looking this much, allowing your attention to roam this much, you realize that you have difficulty maintaining the preservation of ease, then you need to rein in your attention a little more. Same thing with regards to physical seclusion, right? If this amount of physical seclusion, like keeping a distance from your mother, like I'm going to spend my daytime at the local library, or I'm going to spend 2 hours in the afternoon at a nearby park, as opposed to being in the same living room with her. She has the TV on, you have the computer on, and you're kind of not talking with each other, but we could hear, the sort of sensual indulgences that both of you are in. And so there's a subtle animosity, if not even subtle contempt. That's not a good environment to be in. That's really just not the sort of place where samadhi can be built up, right? So you find a different place to go to. Find a place where you could be alone, where you don't have to be in an interactive mode. You don't have to be in a mode where you're trying to prove to your mom who's right, who's wrong, duking it out, trying to manage her emotions when she's, like in a toxic place, and she does the same thing when you're at a toxic place, right? And eventually you'll figure out the right amount of, more or less the right amount of physical seclusion, where you would still have meaningful interactions with her, right? You could show that you care for each other, and you could help each other out with practical affairs, right? Someone's cooking, someone's cleaning, someone this and that. But at the same time, every time you come back, you come back as a person who's recharged, as a person who has quieted down, or at least for a while. And your system is not in this continuous neurotic state. Yeah, that's, in such a state, samadhi is not going to happen.
I'm afraid that I'm not going to succeed at all that, and then she's going to be gone, and then I'm going to have a lot of remorse.
Yeah, so one of the qualities that we as meditators cultivate is we do our utmost in the moment, and that's it. We surrender everything else to God, if you will. We're sorry for being non-Buddhist, right? And if you really do that, you realize that there's no regret. Conversely, if you really do a lot objectively, but you don't have this attitude of surrendering, then I don't care how much you've done for your mother, you're still going to have regret after she died. I don't care how filial, how great, how loving, how generous. I don't care. There's no way you could fill that void. You could be free from regret. So what you need to work on is not on the amount of doting you shower her. It's on this attitude. We do our utmost in the moment, and then we surrender. Just keep working on this attitude. Then you feel like you've done your best. And when we're at our utmost, right, we're like really in the moment. We bring awareness to bear, then it really has this magical property to, like make relationships better, make the way you do things better, make just all around good. Just the old Mahayana word for awareness is samantapatra, right? Which happens to be the name of the bodhisattva, all good, right? Pervasive good, right? Pervasive sagaciousness. It has that effect. Don't take my words. Implement that and reap the benefit, and your faith will grow through repeated confirmations. In the end, it's a quality that really counts. It's not the quantity. You could be, say, for example, a very busy father, right? And you have very little time for your kid. But whenever you are together, you are there. And those karmic seeds that you planted as a result are likely to produce real personality transformations in those kids. Then if you just kind of like dabble, yeah, we go to amusement parks, we spend the last 7 days, doing these parties, kind of like in a mindless way. Yeah. And if this is too much of a hindrance for you, if like what I suggest, sometimes the meditation techniques that's introduced, it's too rarefied, it's too subtle to tackle a gross problem, a big problem. This is like a big problem. Okay, we use like a gross perception. We use a blunt tool, a chainsaw. For example, we learn to think more skillfully. How to think more skillfully about this? Well, think in the following way. In a sense, all sentient beings are our family members. In a sense, all our family members are strangers. They're stranger sentient beings to us. Really, in the ultimate sense, right? In the ultimate sense, all sentient beings are like our family members. Right? We share the same collective unconscious, if you will. Right? There seems to be distinct personalities, but we draw from the same
primordial impulses, mental defilements, tendencies, predispositions, karmic potentials, and so forth. So even though we look like different individuals, but the differences are attributable to different conditioning effects. Okay, so all living beings at one time or another, they are in some sense our family members. Hold that perception. And then conversely, all the loved ones, they are strangers. In what sense? Even someone as dear as your mother, you don't really know her. Right? I mean, the part of her that you really know are her daily routines. Now, these are the things she do. Right? You know, in the morning she does this. At night she goes to her bedroom. She likes these shows. But does that really constitute knowing her? I mean, heck, we don't know this person called ourselves. We don't really know ourselves. We frequently surprise ourselves of the sort of things we're capable of in an unfamiliar situation, much less that we could claim to know someone. And it's due to just these random karmic connections that, oh, we play this related role. You're my mother, I'm your son. Right? But other than that, how much of the vast, the part of her is unknown to you and also to herself. The social personality that we take out to interact with other people is just the tip of the iceberg of the so-called consciousness. So look at that. Really stabilize yourself in this perception. Every time you deal with her, remind yourself, it's like a stranger. Right? I'm dealing with a stranger. So in other words, there's more equanimity. Yeah. And when you're dealing with strangers, these are my family members. The female ones, they're my sisters. They're my mothers. They're my daughters. The male ones, my brothers, my sons, my fathers, right, and so forth. Right, and in fact, alternate between these perceptions. With regard to your mother, see how precious she is. What a true benefactor she is. I know in American culture this is not a big thing, right? In Asian culture, people talk about filial piety a lot. But it has to come from a heartfelt place. That in so many ways, she really poured her heart out to you. And yes, due to her lack of skill, mental defilements and so forth, you clash, you see this ugly side of her, this unflattering side of her, but at the bottom of it, she poured herself, her heart into you. Now, who can you, which other person in the world can you say the same thing about? All right, so just all these different perceptions, change the old patterns of thinking. When you're with your mother and there are like aversive thoughts arising, switch that. Right, hold a different perception. If you need to, take a bow, back up. Right, I need a break. Okay, create some physical seclusion. Go to a library. Go to a park. Right. When you go to a library, go to a park, go to your bedroom. Don't escape into computer game, and things like that. But rather, quiet yourself down. Right. Like abide in a satipatthana. All right. When you feel renewed, when you're ready, and if there's need, then you go out again. And always try to interact with a person with equanimity. You don't hold a unresolved emotion toward that person. It could be, I don't know, like a grudge that you hold against a person. That's like a very gross baggage to hold on for a meditator. It's supposed to be one of the first things you resolve as a meditator, right? Holding grudges and non-forgivingness and just like judging a person because you have these fixed memories about her, things like that. Just do away with that. Okay, so we could stop here if we want, or unless there are other remaining issues you'd like to bring up.
Well, I did just have one general question, but I was going to ask how you balance tranquility with urgency.
Yeah, yeah. It's the way that we handle sankharas. So, I'm kind of like repeating myself. So, like, bear with me, be patient with me. When we're practicing gradual pacification of sankharas, we're not just, as a principle, be opposed to all activities, right? What we're doing is we may be doing things, or we may choose to rest, and all the while being aware of the stressful nature of sankhara. So we understand that sankharas is an exertion. Right? You realize this all the while you are engaging in activities, or all the while you're trying to rest, trying to relax. So what this does to you is that it would incline your mind in the direction of effortlessness without sacrificing necessary action. Okay, you will still be able to perform. You will still be able to carry out your duties, but you are in a place where you're constantly looking for room where things may be dropped. I don't need this straining right here. I don't need this clinging right here. I don't need tension right here. You'll be able to see, around the edges of your action, so to speak. Things are rough. Things are too stressful. You have this general attitude of moving towards letting go, calming sankharas, and your life will be characterized by increasing ease. And you'll become clearer. You'll become better at judging what sankharas need be done, what sankharas need be dropped. You start out with kind of like a befuddled mind. You're hardly able to tell, oh, okay, I'm supposed to drop something, I'm supposed to do something, but I really don't have idea, right? But the interesting thing is, the more you move in this direction of calming sankhara, the clearer your wisdom is. It becomes, the unnecessary sankharas become poignantly painful, or just protruding out. This is stupid, this is hollow, this is superficial, this is silly, this is vain, this is futile. It can manifest itself in different ways, but then your tendency is just to seclude yourself from it. And then with regards to sankharas that need be done, you do it decisively, no uncertainty, with conviction, with precision, right? With frugal use of energy. You execute it with just the energy that's needed and no more. Once again, we're not aiming for perfection, but you are moving generally in that direction. So put it to ground us in more practical terms. Right? Do any one of the satipatthanas, bodily-based, feeling-based, mind-based, Dhamma-based, and you'll find that you're moving in that direction. That all of those satipatthanas, they have something in common, which is, first, you have to learn to recognize what constitutes an activity, what constitutes a movement of the mind. If you're not aware of an activity or a movement of the mind, then you are lost in the train of reflexive behaviors. You're just blindly carried along by impulses. But when you say, this is a movement of mind, this is an activity, then you're in a position to be aware of them. And we could start out with something very simple. A meditator never feel too proud to always go back to the fundamentals. And the fundamentals such as what? Be more aware of the way we do everyday things, like the way we speak. Be more aware of the way we walk around, do chores. So shall we end on that note? Is that okay? Anything else? Are we good? I think it's enough. Great.
Okay.
Please take care, people. Bye,
Thank you very
guys.
much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Chu.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.